You were never too sensitive. You were just too awake in a world that wants you asleep. They don't scream. They don't shove. They don't even raise their voice. But somehow, they still make you feel wrong. Invisible. Too much. You step out of the room, carrying a silence that doesn't belong to you. Shoulders tight, jaw clenched, and a thought creeping in. Maybe it's me. But Carl Jung saw through this long before modern psychology gave it a label. He knew that when a person hasn't faced their own shadow, they'll hurt others quietly, skillfully, by omission, dismissal, emotional withdrawal. And worse, if you don't know your own patterns, you'll keep welcoming it, over and over, thinking you're just unlucky, or not lovable, or too emotional. But let me ask you this. What if every person who hurt you was a reflection, not of your worth, but of what you've been taught to tolerate? Jung didn't just give us theory. He gave us warnings. And 44 of them have been quietly screaming in the subtext of every heartbreak you've survived. If you don't know these 44 truths, people will keep hurting you, and they won't even feel guilty for it, because pain, when it becomes familiar, becomes invisible. Let's begin with the first. Truth 1. If you don't define your value, others will discount it. Every time you stay silent when you should speak, when you discount your own needs to avoid conflict, when you put someone else's comfort above your truth, you create a world where your value is negotiable. Truth 2. The people who benefit from your silence will always call your truth selfish. The moment you start naming your needs, the backlash begins. They'll say you've changed, that you're difficult, that you're not the same. But it's not your truth they hate. It's their loss of control. Truth 3. The shadow isn't evil. It's just unexpressed power. That anger you keep suppressing, that fire in your gut when someone disrespects you, that's not a flaw. It's sacred protection. Your shadow isn't trying to destroy you. It's trying to defend you. Truth 4. People don't hear what you say. They respond to what you tolerate. You can say, "Don't talk to me like that." But if you stay when they do it again, your energy rewrites your words. Boundaries unbacked by action are just noise. Truth 5. Every apology you make for being hurt is a lesson in self-erasure. You've said it too many times. Sorry, I'm just tired. Sorry if I'm overreacting. But Jung would ask, why do you keep apologizing for your pain? What part of you was trained to believe that feeling is a burden? Truth 6. Trauma teaches you to see love in the same shape as your survival. If love meant pleasing, adapting, shrinking, then that's the love you'll seek. But it's not love. It's familiar pain, disguised, replayed. Truth 7. If someone's love requires you to betray yourself, it's not love. It's a transaction, a deal in disguise, one where you lose every time you say yes to what breaks you, just to keep peace that's not even real. Truth 8. The mask you wear to be loved becomes a cage. Your easygoing persona, your always available reputation, your smile when you want to cry. It works until you forget who you are underneath. Truth 9. Emotional labor without reciprocity is exploitation. You comfort them, explain everything, hold space, absorb the damage, and they call it love. But ask yourself, what do you get in return? Because love that only flows one way is not devotion. It's depletion. Truth. 10. You teach people how to treat you by what you allow twice. The first time can be a mistake. But if they do it again and again, that's not on them anymore. That's your silence giving them permission. Truth 11. Not everyone who understands you deserves access to you. Even toxic people can get you. Understand your past, mirror your feelings. But insight without integrity is manipulation in disguise. Just because someone sees your soul doesn't mean they should hold it. Truth 12. You're not too sensitive. You're just finally listening to your nervous system. That sick feeling in your stomach? That energy drop after a call? That urge to withdraw? That's not anxiety. That's truth. Whispering through your body. Truth 13. Loyalty to dysfunction is not virtue. It's conditioning. You stay. You forgive. You justify. But Jung would ask, are you loyal or just afraid? Afraid of loss, of change, of being alone. But staying in pain doesn't make you loyal. It makes you lost. Truth 14. If someone only loves you when you're easy to love, it's not love. It's consumption. The moment you get sick, say no, or disagree, they pull away. That's not rejection. That's revelation. They weren't there for you. They were there for your silence. Truth 15. Over-explaining is a trauma response disguised as logic. When you feel the need to justify, defend, or clarify what should be obvious, it's not about them. It's about your learned fear that clarity will make you unlovable. And this is just the beginning. Let me tell you a story. There was a girl, quiet, soft-spoken, the kind who made herself small in every room. She was always the peacekeeper, the nice one, the one who let others interrupt, the one who laughed at jokes that weren't funny, just to avoid awkwardness. But one day, in a conversation that turned hostile, she didn't laugh. She didn't nod. She didn't explain. She said, "Don't speak to me that way." And then she left. Her legs were shaking. Her chest was tight. But she walked anyway, because she finally realized that being understood is not the same as being safe. Jung believed that each person must go through a symbolic death, the death of the false self. That girl, she buried the version of her who thought endurance was love. And what rose in her place? A person no longer interested in being palatable. Let me ask you something. When did you first learn that being silent was safer than being real? Think back. Was it a parent's tone? A teacher's glare? A friend who ghosted when you cried too much? That moment you learned that truth was dangerous? That's when your real voice went into hiding. And from that day forward, people could hurt you in gentle, manipulative, well-dressed ways, because the part of you that should scream had been sedated. But it's not too late, because these 15 truths aren't meant to make you bitter. They're meant to wake you up. And now, we'll unravel the next 15 truths about projection, narcissism, emotional boundaries, and how to disarm those who use empathy as a weapon. You've made it this far. Don't stop now, because once you know all 44 truths, you don't just stop getting hurt. You stop being haunted by the version of you who tolerated it all just to feel wanted. They always say you've changed, not because you became cruel, but because you became clear. And in a world that thrives on confusion, clarity is confrontation. You start saying no, not loudly, just consistently. You stop answering right away. You stop apologizing for your tone. You stop shrinking to make others feel big. And suddenly, you're difficult. Not because you did anything wrong, but because you stopped doing what made them feel right. Carl Jung warned us, once a person begins to reclaim their shadow, the unspoken, unintegrated self, their energy shifts. And people who benefited from your suppression will feel it as a threat. Not consciously, not always maliciously, but viscerally. Because your new boundaries sound like betrayal to those who only knew you through your silence. Let's pick up where we left off. Truth 16. Healing will make you unrecognizable to people who only knew you broken. They'll say you've changed, and they're right. But what they really mean is, you're no longer easy to exploit. Truth 17. If your love isn't allowed to evolve, it will expire. Relationships don't die from disagreement. They die when one person starts growing and the other refuses to adapt. Love that stays stagnant is love that quietly rots. Truth 18. People fear your boundaries when they benefited from your lack of them. They'll call you cold, guarded, harsh. But that's projection. What they're really saying is, your self-respect now limits my control. Truth 19. When you stop over-explaining, manipulators lose their grip. They thrive on confusion, on endless dialogues that drain you. But once your truth becomes non-negotiable, they fall silent. Because clarity is no longer a conversation. It's a wall. Truth 20. Empathy is only a gift when it's protected by discernment. You've been giving too much to people who see your compassion as currency. You feel their pain more than your own. But love without discernment is a contract for self-erasure. Truth 21. The desire to be understood can make you tolerate the intolerable. You keep trying to explain yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. But the problem isn't your clarity. It's their comfort. Truth 22. When someone crosses your boundary and then gets offended, you've exposed their entitlement. Healthy people adjust when you express a need. Unhealthy ones retaliate, not because your boundary is wrong, but because they were never planning to honor it. Truth 23. You are not responsible for the emotional reactions of people you've outgrown. Guilt will whisper, be softer, be nicer. But growth isn't cruelty, it's clarity. And if your evolution wounds them, it was never your job to shrink to their limits. Truth 24. People don't leave when you become toxic. They leave when you become self-respecting. Watch closely. The moment you start standing up for yourself, people vanish. Not because you're wrong, but because you're no longer easy. Truth 25. Your triggers are not flaws. They are messengers. When someone says you're too reactive, Jung would ask, what memory just got touched? Your emotion isn't a defect. It's information. Truth 26. Projection is when someone accuses you of being the very thing they're afraid to face in themselves. They say you're manipulative when you set a boundary. They say you're selfish when you ask for space. But often, what they see in you is what they refuse to meet within. Truth 27. Some people are addicted to your dysfunction because it validates their own. You're easy to be around when you're anxious, when you doubt yourself, when you overgive. But the moment you heal, they feel exposed because your clarity makes their chaos harder to ignore. Truth 28. When someone withdraws love as punishment, it was never love. It was leverage. You felt it. The cold shoulder after you said no. The silence when you stood your ground. That wasn't love retreating. That was control collapsing. Truth 29. You don't have to explain your boundary. You just have to enforce it. They'll ask why. Push for reasons. Try to debate. But this isn't a courtroom. Your boundary isn't a discussion. It's a door. Locked and final. Truth 30. You don't owe anyone continued access to a version of you they feel entitled to. You've grown. You've changed. You don't laugh at the same jokes. You don't chase like you used to. That's not rudeness. That's revolution. Let me show you something. Jung deeply understood, but rarely stated directly. Every human soul has a gravitational pull, a psychological orbit that attracts situations equal to its self-concept. So if your inner belief is, I must be easy to love, you'll unconsciously seek people who require difficulty to be impressed. If your inner mantra is, I don't deserve too much, you'll settle for those who give just enough to keep you doubting. The universe doesn't give you what you want. It mirrors who you think you are. So now, we'll reveal the final 14 truths, including how to protect your energy from subtle predators, how to stop trauma bonding with people who mirror your wounds, and how to live in such unshakable self-respect that chaos no longer has a key to your life. Because you're almost there. And when you know all 44 truths, not just in your head, but in your body, you'll stop mistaking survival for connection. You'll stop bleeding for love, and you'll finally feel what it means to be whole. Let's finish this journey. Because these last 14 truths aren't about survival. They're about sovereignty. Truth 31. Your peace will trigger those who rely on your chaos. The calmer you become, the louder they get. They can't find you in the patterns anymore. Your silence, once mistaken for submission, has become your shield, and they hate it. Truth 32. If you have to beg someone to understand you, they're committed to misunderstanding you. Clarity doesn't require performance. You should never have to audition for love. Truth 2-3. Some people don't want resolution. They want control. They'll provoke, delay, distract, not to fix things, but to stay in power. Jung knew, when someone fears their own unconscious, they control yours instead. Truth 34. The most dangerous gaslighting is when you do it to yourself. You say, maybe I'm too sensitive. Maybe I'm asking for too much. But ask yourself, where did that voice come from? Who taught you that pain is normal? Truth 35. Self-abandonment wears many disguises: loyalty, sacrifice, spirituality, love. But if you have to disappear to stay connected, that's not devotion. It's a spiritual wound disguised as virtue. Truth 36. You are not difficult. You are just not willing to self-destruct quietly anymore. Let them call you what they want. Labels don't stick to people who know their truth. Truth 37. People who never had boundaries will always see yours as cruelty. And that's okay. Their discomfort is not your responsibility. You weren't born to carry their emotional literacy. Truth 38. Manipulators confuse empathy with access. They think if you understand them, you owe them. But understanding someone doesn't mean you have to tolerate them. Truth 39. You can love someone deeply and still choose yourself completely. This isn't selfish. It's sacred. Love doesn't mean losing yourself. It means becoming so full. You overflow, not deplete. Truth 40. If your absence disturbs them more than your pain ever did, that wasn't love. It was dependency. They didn't miss you. They missed the version of you that didn't ask for anything. Truth 41. The more healed you become, the more boring you are to people addicted to drama. They'll say you're distant. You've changed. You don't engage. That's right, because chaos doesn't feel like home anymore. Truth 42. If their version of love requires your exhaustion, it's not love, it's performance. You're not meant to audition for care. You're meant to be met where you live. Truth 43. Some people bond through wounds, not values. And when you start healing, the bond breaks. They didn't love you. They loved your pain. And when you stop bleeding, they leave. Truth 44. The final form of self-respect is walking away, quietly, fully, without needing them to understand why. You don't need closure. You don't need a final word. You don't need to be right. You just need to be done. Let me show you what that looks like. You wake up one morning and you don't feel the urge to check your phone, not to see if they replied, not to reread the messages, not to rehearse what you'll say next time, because something inside you finally closed, not out of bitterness, but clarity. You realize the apology never came. The respect was never real. The love was always conditional. And instead of spiraling, you just breathe. You get up, make tea, stand in the light. You don't need revenge, or validation, or explanation. You just feel whole. That's the silent miracle Jung spoke of. The moment your identity is no longer dependent on how others treat you, because you've faced the mirror, and you didn't flinch. Let me ask you this. What's the cost of staying small, of being nice instead of honest, of making sure they're comfortable while your soul is suffocating? You've been trained to fear the consequences of truth. But what about the consequences of silence? Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But that privilege is earned through grief, through shedding, through disappointing every person who only loved your camouflage. You're here now. You've remembered the truths. You've seen the patterns. You've stopped calling pain loyalty. And now something begins. You become magnetic, not to everyone, but to those who recognize truth, who have done their own shadow work, who don't fear your depth, who honor your no as much as your yes. Your life becomes lighter, not because there's less weight, but because you stopped carrying what wasn't yours. Your days become quieter, not because you're alone, but because chaos doesn't knock anymore. And your soul becomes louder, not in words, but in presence. Because this is what it means to know all 44 truths. You're no longer available for self-erasure. You no longer mistake survival for connection. You no longer confuse potential with partnership. And you never again bleed for validation. You live, you breathe, you rest, and in your rest, you rise.